Hello, friends. This is the AlphaList podcast. I am your host, Toby. The goal of the AlphaList podcast is to empower CTOs with the info and insight they need to make the best decisions for their company. We do this by hosting top thought leaders and picking their brains for insights into technical leadership and tech trends. If you believe in the power of accumulated knowledge to accelerate growth, make sure to subscribe to this podcast. Plus, if you're an experienced CTO, you will love the discussion happening in our Slack space where over 600 CTOs are sharing insights, or visit one of our events. Just go to alphalist.com to apply. Welcome to the AlphaList podcast. I am your host, Toby, and today with me is Dominik. Dominik is the CEO and co-founder of the CMS StoryBlok that I guess like almost everyone out there knows. And from my perspective, they have like a brilliant growth story. They are 100% remote first, and they know how to build developer products. So the idea today is to really focus on that. Welcome, Dominik.
Thanks, Toby, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. First of all, you initially bootstrapped, and then you raised, I think, over 50 million last year. Is that true?
So we're bootstrapped fully, and we raised a total of 58 million. But last year was only short of like 50 million with 47 million. In the last
Crazy.
Year.
Why?
Why did we raise so much, or why did we only raise 47?
Why? These days, it's kind of cool to be a bootstrapper. Like, why did you derive from that coolness to the very much VC driven?
Yeah, so for us, it was actually me building like the whole product in the beginning. So from 2017 to late 2019. And at the time, we were already working together with 25,000 customers on the platform, fully bootstrapped. So we made about $1 million in ARR, mostly self-service. And then more and more large enterprise customers came to us. And we felt like we owe them some kind of support that we expected from the other CMSs on the market. And we were still using other CMSs. So for us, it was like, how can we finance that? How can we help build a better platform? And at the end, how can we service all those customers at the same time, right? So for us, the only way of doing that, plus also have a lot of security for the people that we would hire, would be the VC route. And the VC route doesn't mean you need to grow exponentially and break the company on the go. You can also grow fast and scale in a nice way. There's different approaches to it.
Okay, interesting. But typically, you have then like a bit of growth pressure if you do it that way. Your history kind of reminds me of my early days as a programmer. When I don't know if you know that time in the let's say 90s to zeros when I was a PHP dude back then and everyone around me was building a CMS And you told me when we were first talking that you also had an agency and then you built out that CMS out of that agency and so on. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yes, so Alex and I were part of an agency, and funny enough, Alex and I, we both started in PHP as well. And Alex built a PHP CMS back in the early days as well. But the concepts were slightly different. So only in the CMS that we now poured so much time into, like StoryBlok, we actually made something different. And a CMS is not always a CMS. Content management system by now means so much. You can go into e-commerce, you can go into full database approach, or you can focus more on the marketing side. And we did a split where the UI is built purely for marketers, while the API product of it, like the management API and the read-only content delivery API, those are built for developers, right? So this was the big difference that we started building upon. And when you realize you save about 60% of every project, in terms of time within an agency, and you might realize that, hey, maybe somebody else wants to use it as well. And then one thing went to another. And I have to tell you, we didn't plan to build a CMS that people actually like at that point. We actually just built a prototype and then started to get traction purely word of mouth. Like literally, people just told other people, and it started to scale.
Okay, interesting. And you yourself, you're also a techie, so you were like
Yes.
a band of techies back then.
Yeah, so I still call myself developer. I guess many people would disagree by now. No, but Alex and I, we've been like developers since like ever. Alex is a little bit longer than I am. So Alex is like 34 right now. He has been a developer since like 15 years, something like that. Before that, he was a designer. So he's a self-taught developer. And I, for myself, I actually didn't study software engineering. In Austria, there's a different kind of school system that allows you to jump into development when you're like 13, something like that. So that was quite nice. And I started selling my first sites when I was 15, built on PHP, then actually moved into Java, backend development, C# as well, moved into front end. Yeah, ever since then, we build things, right? So it didn't stop with StoryBlok.
And at a certain point, you also pivoted to Rails, as I did as well.
Yeah.
Why is that?
A friend of mine told me when before I started using Ruby on Rails, that it feels like you're just like wearing a pajama that is super comfy, and you don't have to basically get on something else, right? Because it just works. And I was super intrigued coming from like the Java PHP kind of side of things, where things were slow back then. And when I tried Ruby, especially with Rails, there was so many things just done right. And as soon as you scale your team, having the same conventions basically already built into the framework you're using, it was just faster for us, right? So, and I guess same is true for you. Like if you're looking back at Ruby, like it felt
absolutely
right.
Yeah, it just felt right. Yeah. And well, as long as you don't have anything in production and you're like in the early phase of building, if you enter like the late phase of building, like things start feeling wrong every once in a while. But I guess you know that as well, right? If you have like something production ready, then yeah, type safety could be a plus.
There are some nice things to type safety for sure.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, we wouldn't want to miss it. The way we were able to scale with Ruby and Ruby on Rails so far with our APIs was just phenomenal. Like the front end, we switched over to Vue.js really early on. Like version 0.11 was like the version we used to actually start out with Vue.js. Actually, first version of StoryBlok was built with PHP, and we switched to Ruby and Vue.js when we realized, hey, things like with reloading isn't that nice.
Okay. And you essentially picked one route then where you mix languages. Like, do you regret that? Like you have Ruby on the backend side, and then you have Node.js and Vue.js in the front end. And from my perspective, it's can be bumpy. Like
actually, we really liked it, you know. So Alex was more on the Ruby side and especially Rails side. I was more on the front end side at the time. So the split between front end and back end for us was quite nice, especially thinking of, hey, we do have two products. One, the management API, the content delivery API that we created for developers. So it was nice to have it split away, right? And the UI itself was created for marketeers. So it was a completely different user group. And having those things not just separate in your mind, but also in the code base was really nice. And at the same time, given that the UI of StoryBlok is just another customer of the management API itself, it helped us actually to get the API to a level where it is like really useful by now.
And so you would do it again? You would choose exactly the same tech stack again as of today?
So far, we didn't hit any roadblockers. So I guess, yes, we would. Yeah. There's some cool things where you could do something like with Rust, which might be a little bit faster when it comes to delivery of content and something like that. But at the end, if you have a proper cache strategy and if you know how to scale your infrastructure, and we are using AWS here, so it's quite it makes sense to just do the things with the tools that you already know. I mean, there's some things that we did differently, you know, like the image optimization service that we created, which we call image service. We built with Python. So it just makes sense to use tools that are fit for whatever you're building. And Ruby on Rails is perfect for REST APIs that we have started with. Vue is amazing when you want to build views, right? So that's actually really, really nice. Looking in Python now for image optimization and image like manipulation, perfect tool for that as well. So yeah, I guess we would do the same.
Okay. I like my perspective is kind of sometimes very critical towards the single page web app world. But that is also due to the fact that like in many cases you still want to add server side rendering, which I guess you don't really need, right? If I see it correctly, or
so for our application, like the app.storyblok.com, you don't need it. You don't need it all. It's a pure CRUD application. You don't need any server-side component to it. Of course, you could do some things where you already pre-render certain elements of the UI already for the customer. But at the end, if you have a proper SPA with a lot of like caching and lazy loading attached to it, and a lot of progressive enhancement where you just load things that are working for your browser, like there's nothing that stops you. For a website, I would never recommend an SPA. There are easier ways to. Our website right now is running on Sinatra and Liquid, so there's not a problem.
It's quite old school.
Yeah, but to be honest, that's the beauty. So we started with StoryBlok at the same time when we built the first site, and the first site we never relaunched. We just recreated the elements and components over the time, and so we never had the pain of like relaunching it. But given that we now have a website team, they're currently rebuilding it in Astro. So there will be changes happening on the site.
In Astro. And that means, you have to use your CMS. Obviously, you can't use WordPress for your website, right?
Oh, we never did. We know about competitors that actually did. So it's super fun.
That use WordPress for their own website.
WordPress for their blog. Yeah, we saw a couple of them.
I can imagine, because it's kind of a no-frills setup, right? Many marketers can work with it, but if you build a tool that addresses marketers, then it might be weird, right?
Yeah. So for us, it was like a complete no-go.
How big is your team these days?
So by now it's 235 people in 47 countries.
Really? That's quite huge. And is there like a geographical center, or is it like fully distributed?
Fully distributed. Like we don't have offices. Actually, right now I'm in my home office as well. Same is true for most of our teammates as well. Some of them are in Coworking Spaces, but not in like one, but in the one that is closest to their home. So even that is distributed. And I'm currently in Austria, so there are a couple of people in Austria, not in my hometown, but surrounding Austria because of like taxes, finance, and those kind of things. But looking, for example, development, there's a lot of things happening in Brazil right now. Maybe due to Alex like living there as well. So for us, it was like a big kind of like no-brainer to move. To where people are actually, or have them not move actually.
And I once had the CTO of GitLab here in the podcast, and they are kind of one of the remote first companies, and that was a great to understand what they do and how. What about yourself? Like, do you, or StoryBlok, do you organize like a yearly summit? Do you encourage teams to meet regularly? How do you manage that?
Yeah, so we started hiring in 2020. So before that, there were no team retreats because it was literally Alex and me sitting next to each other with a beer and pizza in some kind of office space. Then COVID hit. So in 2020 and 2021, there was also no way of us getting the team together. So only last year in 2022, there were the department meetings that have happened. So like sales came together, or development team came together, and so on. We made it on a department level because the risk for us as a company was just smaller in that way, rather than like having all 200 people in one place, and having people might be infected. So the whole company gets ill. Having like the small departments, we felt like there's a risk that we can estimate, and it's okay. And turned out to be fine. For this year in September, we plan to have our first ever team retreat. We should be at about 250, 260 people by then. So I'm actually super excited to finally see them in person, or at least most of them.
And where do you do that?
That's a good question. We got an event agency to help us with that, because the largest pain we thought first would be the amount of people, but then realized, no, that's actually not a big topic. It's the visa. So getting the visa for everybody globally to enter one point at the same time, that is quite a challenge, and you should definitely start like 4 or 5 months before you actually like want to do that event. So most likely it will be something in Spain or something around like Portugal, just because of the visa situation.
Yeah. Lisbon and Barcelona are kind of
these spaces
ready for that, right? Also in terms of like having a nice place where people really enjoy staying is also quite important, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it will be the first time, so there will be a lot of like social kind of events happening as well, but it will not just be social kind of topics and team building things. We actually want to work there. So there needs to be enough like meeting rooms. There needs to be enough kind of like, kind of presentation stages where we can showcase new product features, where we can showcase new innovations that we are building right now, but also give people insight into sales, marketing, and other opportunities that we are currently doing.
And for how long do you plan that? Like how many days?
It should be a full week, so 5 days actually. So arrive on Monday and fly back on Friday.
Which is also an investment for people with families and so on. So
yes, definitely. And it's actually still an investment, not just for the families, but also from a company perspective.
Okay, cool. You mentioned the co-working spaces. Like, do you encourage people to work in co-working spaces, or can they request something? Like, is that given that like everyone can get like a seat in a co-working space, or?
Yeah, exactly that. Everybody that wants to use a co-working space, they can do that. We usually partner with a service or a company called Regus or Reaches. They are globally available. They have business lounges. They have like proper desks that you can rent, either as a flex system or as a complete, like, this is your desk kind of situation. And if people want to use that, they're always happy to just go there. But it's an either or kind of situation. So if you want to use co-working spaces, we will like purchase and rent the equipment you would need, like a proper screen, proper chair, and all those things for you for that location. And we would not duplicate it for your home setup as well. So if you want to have a home setup with all your stuff, we would set it up there. So we would not buy multiple like home setups for different locations.
How do you do Regus is like the boring version of WeWork, I guess, right? As far as I have it in mind.
Some people told me it's the WeWork that works, but that's not me to judge.
How do you do procurement for your stuff? Like your hardware is obviously like delivering hardware at a decent level of quality, maybe even manage devices and so on throughout the globe is a challenge, isn't it?
Yes, and it was definitely a big challenge back in 2020 because there was literally nothing around that. But end of 2020, there were things popping up, and the one we settled for is called Hofy, HOFY.com, I believe. And this platform is essentially more or less an e-commerce store that you yourself as a company owner and procurement team can set up with like devices, chairs, tables, webcam, and all kind of like equipment you might need. And you can also strip bundles like you want your sales team to have always a MacBook and a proper webcam, proper microphone or headset or something like that. And then you can send it to them at once. And then you can give all your team members also credits where they can then customize their setup. So some people want to have like a magic mouse. Some other people want to have a normal mouse. Some people want to have 2 screens. Some want 1 screen. So there's always this kind of difference that they might want to choose. And then you can give them like the credit kind of score that they can just swipe through essentially. And then they get this delivered and have it at their home step immediately to set up.
And if you order a Mac there, I guess it's then already managed, or you can at least integrate it in your infrastructure.
Yeah. So for MDM, we use Kanji and so on. So that can also be set up.
Okay, but they are flexible there. Not that I want to do advertising for them, but is it then rented hardware? Like, do you rent your stuff?
It's rented hardware. Yeah, in a remote setting, I highly recommend rented hardware kind of setup, because if you need to onboard somebody quickly and you purchase that first and you purchase it to your like we don't have an office, so it's hard for me to say office address. But if I would order it to my home address and then reship it somewhere else, it's super expensive, but I would need a certain like shipping address to some extent to get it into our tax records. So we ignored that completely and said, okay, we just rent it. For that, we cannot like write it off from tax reasons because it's rented and it's not purchased. But at the end, it helped us really a lot because if a device breaks, we can just issue a new one immediately in 24 hours to like 48 hours later. They have the new MacBook at the door again, and everything works again, which is really nice. And they also like get it back for you. So if you're in a situation where you would need to do offboarding, you don't have to think about, okay, how do they ship it back? Do you need to have like a local vendor that actually takes like the devices, the table, or like a chair, something like that? No, you can just say, hey, we're currently offboarding this person. So there's somebody coming to their place and basically taking those things together with them in the packages and just have it available for somebody else.
So you don't have to trust your people.
Oh, other way around. You actually have to trust them, definitely, because you actually don't know what's going to happen with the devices. And we had the case where people just like disappeared essentially. So they moved flats without telling us, and also didn't show back once we wanted to offboard them. So there are devices that are just left, and then you need to pay them out from the renting kind of agency. But that's like the risk of remote work.
One big topic is also like, do you employ people really, or do you work with freelancers? Like, what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, so for us, it's an employer of record kind of style, except for Germany and also Austria as well as Brazil. There we do have our own entities. Yeah. And everywhere else, there's tools like remote.com, Let's Steal.com, Velocity in the US. Yeah. And there we partner with an employer of record essentially.
Okay, so you essentially don't mind, and as long as in a certain country, or what happens if you let's say you grow like a very large team in Poland, would you then also think about like opening a subsidiary there, or is there like a rule of thumb, or
should not be the case? No,
too complex.
The main reason for us to open a subsidiary is not so much on the employed side, because you can employ them with an employer of record. Yeah. And if you're not the only customer of that person, especially in design, for example, you can still work with contractors. That's like a normal contractor work. You don't employ them at that level. But for us to establish an entity would be more on the sales side. So, for example, in the US, it might make sense for us to establish a US entity, simply because somebody should like have direct liability in that country with certain local laws that we need to fulfill. Yeah. And then we would go for a subsidiary in a certain country.
Okay. Revenue has to be there. Interesting.
Revenue, we would need to switch over there. Yeah.
And do you have tips on remote hiring these days? I guess like no one really will tell the best hiring tips in a podcast, but.
Oh, we can certainly. So we're trying a lot of things. So there's a job fair that we are going to have like on the 23rd of February. It's the first time where we do like everybody can just come in and talk with us essentially. So it's like this cultural kind of fit. For a remote kind of setup, culture and motivation is way more important than the actual like skill tests. What we do is normally we do have a 2-stage kind of sales process. First time is or one of our recruiters, talent acquisition team members, interviews you 30 minutes and explains your task that is going to happen together with a hiring manager, which is usually the person that is currently hiring for that role. And then there's this task that you get for like basically at home kind of style. It's usually something that you would also do on your day-by-day tasks or something like that. That is not used by us in any way, but is helping you to get an understanding of what's going to happen in that role. And then this will be presented. And this is like this form of like validation of, do you know what you're talking about or not? But other than that, it's purely on a motivation and cultural thing. And for us in a remote setup, I highly recommend hiring more senior person, because you would need people that know how they work, not necessarily how they work with your team, but know how they themselves work. They work in the morning or in the afternoon? Do they know how to do time management? Are they aware that they will be not having somebody that goes with them on a coffee chat right there, like every day essentially, because it's not in an office. So seniors would be easier on the recruiting side. when it comes to channels, I guess having sponsorships all over the place together with OMR or something like that, this is a good way to actually brand yourself. Shameless plug there, but it actually works. We got a lot of good candidates in. So yeah, there's so many options you can go for, and it depends on what you're searching for. If you're searching for amazing finance people, you might want to look into Switzerland because that's where all the money of the world basically sits. If you want to talk to somebody for sales, like PDRs, SDRs, that talks a lot of languages, highly recommend Barcelona because they speak so many languages. Yeah. So you might want to think different here.
Yeah. So you get like specialists from each of the countries. Where do you find good developers?
Oh, globally. That's the only thing where I have to say, like, developers are literally everywhere. You can find like the best people for certain DevOps topics, for example, in Brazil. Like the person running infrastructure at StoryBlok is just a mastermind. What he does with Terraform and Kubernetes in like 2 weeks or something, I would not be able to do in a year. So it's just mind blowing.
Okay. And do you have any platforms that are good for remote hiring? Like, I don't know, do you search on Stack Overflow, or do you search on which is a bit outdated, I guess, or do you search on Remote OK, or what is?
So for us, we actually by now only use Smart Recruiter, and with Smart Recruiter you can basically select remote kind of outlets and share for that. For some roles, we did specific outlets that have focus on not just remote, but that kind of role that we would looking for. And there's no particular one that I would recommend because it really depends on the role that you're searching for. If you're searching for developers, you might want to actually sponsor like an event in that area or the technology that you're looking for. You would not just post random posts on LinkedIn and stuff like that. You would actually go into the community and talk to them, which is way easier. Like the first, fun story. Like the first thing, or the first developer that ever joined us, we found by Alex creating a GitHub issue for a Vue.js conference in Brazil, that we are searching for developers. And literally like the two that we got in, were like the ones that applied from there.
Okay. Understood. One thing, like we briefly touched trust, connected to like hardware and laptops, but generally, I mean, trust is a big topic in remote first. Do you fully trust your people, and that's like your concept, or do you also have, I don't know, I don't want to say like surveillance, but do you have tools to like check productivity? Do you have feedback processes where you stay engaged with the people? I mean, engagement is very important, right? And I guess like there are some tools. And then, do you trust your leaders that everyone is productive? Also, like the developers are fully productive, or do you do something there? Like, how do you see that?
Yes, we trust our people 100%, but a company that doesn't trust their people should rethink their organization. So,
correct.
That's a given. And of course, we do have KPIs. Of course, we do have somewhat of a tracking. But this comes natural because people want to improve on themselves as well. Yeah. So we're not tracking, like for some countries, we have to track on time because it's legally obligated for us to do that.
Like Germany,
but it's not,
right?
But it's not something that we like puts too much kind of like thought into. Only if they would overrun like the hours, then we would tell them, hey, you should really reconsider how you work because you should not work like 20 hours a day. We didn't have the case yet, but that's usually not the case that people would do that. For developers, we do have Jira. We have normal like storyboards. We have like scores that we want in certain sprints, and we can see how many bugs we're fixing. We can measure like the Net Promoter Score for our customers, and we tend to actually like try to get this kind of metrics in because they are more important to us than like timing kind of expectation versus realities in KPIs. And we also do have an internal performance review every year. First time we are doing that right now, essentially. So literally right now, there's a merit increase attached to like a performance increase as well. And there's complete performance overview and review of the whole company. We'll do another one next year latest and see how we progress in that. But I feel like this actually helps because it helps us to identify where we can help our people to like be faster, where they need retraining, where we can support them with some kind of a workshop or something like that. So yeah, definitely. We do that, but we still trust our people.
Yeah. Without trust, is hard. But do you use like a certain tool for that feedback process, like CultureAmp or?
So actually, we use Bamboo HR as our
Bamboo HR,
HRIS.
okay.
And in Bamboo HR, we also implemented this performance kind of review. It's a simple set of questions that the manager would basically answer towards their employees, and also their team members would like rate their team manager and give feedback to them. And only if both of them submitted their review, they can read it essentially. So it's a nice way where you're not influenced by your own feedback before you receive the other. And then we basically like try to improve from that. You can also measure like a company well-being kind of score inside Bamboo HR, which is quite helpful. It's basically a question of like a normal NPS score. So Net Promoter Score. Would you recommend people to work at StoryBlok? Yes or no? Or 0 to 10? And we were quite nice for us. It was like a score from 0 to 200. And we had like 89 in the last rating. So I'm really curious how it will be this time. Like we just did another one last week. So I'm really curious about the results.
Great. What do you think about like sync versus async? Like you mentioned Brazil as one of your top locations. I guess you then have to work in a very flexible way and have to deal with many time zones. Like, what do you think about that?
So remote work is not too hard when it comes to just locations, but like the time zone is like the difficult one. We tend to record a lot of our meetings, so especially our team meetings are always recorded. Many of our colleagues also moved into the async kind of way where they would record a video, then post it in a certain channel for like review for others, and then only schedule like a Q&A session, one in the morning, one in the late afternoon to basically cover the time zones. Because the one piece where people actually don't have to be there with you is the part where you, for example, present a new process, where you present an update on the overall kind of architecture or something like that, where it's more like you provide information to somebody else, and only the Q&A part is then a synchrone kind of communication style. And also there you can just record it or like write down like the questions and answers, and then note it down in Notion, which is a tool we use quite regularly.
I guess then Slack and Notion and so on.
Slack, Notion. Then in Slack we use Donut, which is like this cool kind of small kind of tool, but it's super helpful because it's just random coffees with the company. And I really like it. It's really cool because people can suddenly communicate with different teams without them thinking about who I should talk to, because it's just like random for them. And of course, people can opt out as well if they don't want to. They don't have to. But it's a nice way of engaging with the rest of the company that you would usually not like meet in a kitchen or something like that.
Any other like tools that belong to your tool chain that are quite important for the effectiveness of the process?
I would say like for the onboarding area, we use Savvy, CAVVY. And this one is really, really remarkable. You can basically set up a complete learning journey. So that means you can define like a proper onboarding for your sales team, for your marketing team, for your partner team, developer team, and so on. So they have one guided go through where you have like every 2 days another journey will be opened where they can basically navigate through. And you can also do some pre-onboarding. So it's basically a guided learning kind of curve for current learning journey that you can go through. And that helped us a lot in terms of onboarding. For sales, we also, in addition to the normal onboarding of like StoryBlok and so on, we use MindTickler, which is another kind of onboarding kind of tool. And those two in combination are like really, really, really helpful. Especially with like security kind of journeys as well.
Yeah, I guess onboarding is like a topic that many people underestimate, right?
Yeah, like in a remote setup, you don't have your desks, you don't have an office where you would arrive on your first day. So everybody that is listening to the podcast right now already at least once in their life had this experience where they came to an office the first time that they started at the company. And then they were super happy that somebody actually thought about the laptop that you would need for your first day. And it was maybe hopefully on your desk, and you didn't have to go to IT to get a random old kind of MacBook. You would not be able to do that in a remote setup, right? So we need to first ship the equipment in a certain way. There's no onboarding buddy or somebody that like welcomes you on the first day. That would be hard to do in like a physical way, but of course we do that in a remote setting. But those things need to be scheduled because Otherwise, people would not know what to do, right? Like the first day at a new job, you usually get to know the coffee machine, and you would need to get the team. Like those are the two main things. And with StoryBlok, you would also need to understand the company. And we built that in this onboarding journey, which takes you 4 weeks, basically throughout to understand like the product, the team, the processes, and all those things. And then you actually start working for real.
And is that like full of entertaining videos and so on of yourself?
Definitely. It's a mix of all kind of videos, but also invitations to chats with our colleagues and leaders from various departments. There's information about how you can spend company money, but also how you like normal things like how would you like set up like a PTO for yourself. Many people don't know that you can actually take vacations, so we tend to try to like tell them how to do those things really early on, and we just create the videos on how to use certain things with Bamboo HR, how to do expense management, like the boring part, right? But the part that gets people to be welcomed, like they find everything immediately. If they don't find anything, they can search through it and find it when they need it. It's a nice thing to have, and you would actually think that normal companies, like companies that have offices, would also pay more attention to it. But this is like, if you want to take one thing away from this podcast now, have a look at your onboarding journey for the company and the departments. Write it down. Use something like a Savvy or something like that, because it really, really helps you. And the Notion page with check boxes doesn't cut it. So it's a big difference.
Or the Asana project, which
well, yeah.
Okay, understood. One very important aspect of remote is also like salaries, and having concept for fair salaries across the globe. How do you manage that?
Yeah, you mentioned GitLab before, and GitLab had this amazing kind of salary calculator.
The database, yes.
Yes. And we do have something similar within StoryBlok. It's not as sophisticated in terms of like one database where you can go through, because we are just not at the point where we will do that and where we will be able to deliver like this kind of like clearness at the point. But what we do is we bought different kind of data sets globally from ranking agencies that do salary bandwidths. And then we combined that together with a minimum kind of salary that we want to pay globally. So it's 2,000 a month. That is minimum, no matter where you are. And then depending on the local variance on the salary, we would then basically rise that to whatever it is. We decided against like a global same kind of salary because for us as a business, we would not be able to do that, because we don't need people sitting in San Francisco all the time. That's not the case. But maybe there's a talent that we would need to pay more for. So we decided to have a location-based salary together with like this kind of variance where you say, hey, there's a minimum fee that everybody should at least earn at StoryBlok. And then we basically break it down on geographics and territories and have a range of like the top 10%, the top like 75% and so on. So we basically break it down by that. But there are two different kind of sides to it. And we also do have that argument every other month inside StoryBlok if you should change something or not. But for us, as of now, like the idea is not to pay the same dollar amount or the same euro amount, because currencies are also different and you need to pay people in a certain currency as well. But what we decided on is that we have a look at the same kind of life kind of level. And it seems to be okay for our colleagues.
Okay. And is it also based on cost of living in a way?
To some extent. So the salary bandwidths do have that directly included. They usually already built around that. So we are quite lucky with the way that we handle that, because this like the databases that we purchased, I can share a link later on when I share the link to the podcast.
Sure.
Where we purchased those kind of salary bandwidths, and we then just like build it together, and we try to then find like the ranges that make sense for us, because of course sometimes we need to make an exception, but most of the time it's quite simple. And GitLab still has an online version of their calculator. You can find it on the web archive. So if you're looking for that,
so you're secretly using that still.
You can at least make a kind of sanity check, Also like Buffer has a lot of like public data that you can look into, and there are different options you can do. And and for us, like the purchasing of the salary ranges together with 2 persons dedicated just on the benefits inside StoryBlok, salary and benefits is not something that the manager decides by themselves. They're literally persons inside StoryBlok that do the benchmarking. So,
okay, cool. And would you be fine with sharing the data sets that you purchased, or is that?
Well, yes, of course. We are not allowed to share the data itself because it's a
obviously
like a purchased one. But 100% we can share the sources itself. Yeah.
Okay, would be interesting for the show notes. Maybe we can put it in there.
Sounds good.
Because I feel like that's a problem many CTOs have and are facing these days. And
and it comes down to how you want to set everything up, because you of course also can do like the same salary on like global scale, but what is then the salary you would set up, right? Like
San Francisco based.
Then we would need to stop everything immediately. Yeah.
Do you think that like back then with GitLab it was kind of the outcome that there will be this global leveling out, that at a certain point like people in Germany will have the same salary as people in China or San Francisco? Do you believe in that?
I don't think so. Just because of like the different kind of jobs, the different kind of experiences you might need, the different kind of rest of the economy, not just IT, because in the IT sector, in the software development sector, we are in the like highest paid jobs anyway. And if you just think about that, you can not see like a global same salary across the different countries, not just in one company, but in general. Like it's really hard to pull off. And we don't see it yet. So if you look into companies at the larger scale that do have somewhat of a remote kind of idea attached to it as well, where you can actually work at home like a complete year if you want to, we do see location-based salaries. And that is basically due to the differences in taxes. There are states and countries where there's a different tax calculation based on like, for example, in Dubai, you don't have any kind of taxes on your salary. In Austria, there is a tax that you would pay yourself as an employee, plus the employer also has to pay another like 33%. So it's like the employee gives up like 40%, 30%, 50%, plus the company needs to pay 33%. So naturally, just from the tax perspective in itself, based on the different countries, you will have a difference because
you have to have different salary. Yeah. You're right. Do you offer global ESOP as well?
Yeah, we offer the global ESOP. It's not an employee share option pool; it's a virtual share option pool. So there's a lawyer or law firm in Austria and also like in Central Europe. Schönherr, highly recommend them. It's a really easy setup with them for an Austrian GmbH. It was a really hard process to get to the point, but with them it was super nice for an Austrian company. The easiest thing you can do is to actually not establish a company in Germany or Austria. Just take like a UK limited or like a Delaware, Wyoming kind of limited company and do it there, because the moment you're like start, you already have all the documents. Like literally, it's the easiest thing you can do. Yeah, it's challenging.
Okay, so if you could turn back time, you would maybe found an LLC and
most likely Delaware. Yeah.
Okay.
And because it makes not too much difference in the way we would operate StoryBlok today, but it would make a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of things that are just due to Austria really, really simple. Literally talking about like signing an investment kind of document. You don't need to have a notary go with you like line by line, read it out loud, and then have like 10 people sign it. You can just send out a DocuSign, and that's such a relief if you would be able to do that. But yeah, takes a while.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
So slowly coming to the end, I think it's like quite good answers that you gave me. And I still like to hear what the best thing of being a remote first company is and what the worst thing from your perspective is. Please be honest. I'm sure there are downsides.
Yes, there are a lot of downsides as well. But to start with the best thing is you can just experience so many different cultures. And the worst thing is you can experience so many different cultures. It's not in a bad way, but the cool thing is, you experience people on the day by day kind of basis. So you experience like the highlights for them and also the lowlights of their life. And that's true for every company. And you can see how people in different cultures react differently to different news, right? So there are people that lost close relatives that you thought, okay, hey, you should maybe take some time off. And they're like, no, I'm fine. I'm totally good. And then there are people that actually come to you, hey, I actually do need time off now for like at least 2 weeks. So there's those different kind of cultural nuances that you experience, and they can either be like really, really nice, or they can be really, really heavy. So there are all kind of variations. And the problem with remote work, if you're coming to the worst thing, you don't see it on your day-by-day kind of meetings. You would see it in a coffee chat that people are like one person might not doing that well. And there were like severe kind of mental issues with one of our colleagues, like a couple of months ago, to the point where it was not healthy at all. So we were able to help that person, and move forward. But there are some really, really things that you would see in an office that you would not see in a remote kind of company because of the distance that you would still have on your day-by-day job. So prepare yourself to experience something like that, because at a certain point with more people, you will see that sooner than later. But the nice thing is you would experience so many highlights that outlight like the lowlights for sure. Like one thing is everybody globally is like loves their food, and people would like share so many pictures of different cuisines and cultures. And the best thing is we have this complete food guide in StoryBlok. Like literally globally, we have like 92 pages full of restaurants where you should actually meet and go to if you're in certain countries. And those are things that I would never experience in like a normal office kind of company. Maybe in the city that I have the office where, hey, yeah, this is a good recommendation, but you get like 235 times the same recommendation. And for us, it's like hundreds of restaurants globally that they would like really tell you to go to. So yeah, hope
that's cool. Yeah, that's really different. That's really different. And if you could give 3 top tips or hints for CTOs that want to go fully remote, which 3 would it be?
Yeah, if you really consider fully remote, you cannot do it on your own in your own department. It's something that the whole company needs to do.
Yeah.
So that's the first tip. If you really want to do that, your whole company needs to pull that string, because otherwise you're building 2 organizations. Second one is, if you want to hire exceptional people, don't expect them to be in your 10-kilometer radius. Expect them to sit somewhere, at the bottom of the Himalaya. I'm not kidding. And like have like the best life there, and you just like employ them for an employer of record. And the third thing is like, get onboarding right. The more people understand about your product itself before they touch a code base, the better it will be in like a month or 2 from now. So try to give them like an insight of how things work inside the company, inside the product, how the complete architecture of your complete product looks like. So they have an understanding, okay, if I touch this code here, this is not just like isolated in this one like area. It can completely destroy the whole infrastructure, or the other way around. So it's giving them a proper onboarding with a bigger picture is like the pure gold.
Yeah. Obviously you somehow have to transport your culture as well, right? Which
of course
can be hard in just written form, or just I don't know.
Oh, you can make some funny videos.
Okay. Then I still have a little surprise for you. Your partner Alex told me about that little Easter egg in your API product, which he is building. It is called Time Machine. And through that, you have the chance to travel back in time for almost every entity in your content repository. And there's actually one article about yourself in that StoryBlok content repository, and we now have the chance to really like travel back in time to the year 2012 when you just started off as a freelance consultant. Back then, and you now have the chance, like we see, like observe yourself for a while. You were working like in different projects in your agency and just got started, and you now have the chance to whisper something into young Dominik's ears, what would it be?
Oof. Just keep going. There will be lowlights. There will be super nice things. Just keep going.
It all levels out.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, but seriously, there are things where you're like, I'm so short of quitting everything. And that's normal if you build companies or if you build like things inside an agency because it's stressful. So just keep going. It's super fun, and of course there's some days where like, I better not go out of the bed. But the next day you're like, yeah, now I can move mountains again. So just keep going.
Okay, cool. Was really lots of fun talking to you. I really enjoyed it. So a super nice guy, and I hope we have the chance in the future again. And maybe meet at OMR this year or something like that.
100%.
I hope you're going to be there. Was really fun.
Same for me too. Thanks for having me again.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the AlphaList podcast. If you like this episode, share it with friends. I'm sure they love it too. Make sure to subscribe so you can hear deep insights into technical leadership and technology trends as they become available. Also, please tell us if there is a topic you would like to hear more about or a technical leader whose brain you would like us to pick. AlphaList is all about helping CTOs getting access to the insights they need to make the best decisions for their company. Please send us suggestions to cto@alphalist.com. Send me a message on LinkedIn or Twitter. After all, the more knowledge we bring to CTOs, the more growth we see in tech. Or, as we say on AlphaList, accumulated knowledge to accelerate growth. See you in the next episode.